Oh, I love it.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you all for coming here tonight. My name is Nicole. I'm one of the marketing coordinators on the events team at Books Are Magic. We're so excited to have Hawa, Hassan, and Kimberly Drew with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Setting a Place for Us. But before we get started, I'm going to point out some logistics. If you need to use the restroom at any point, it's right there next to the moleskin spinner. We're going to be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end. So start thinking of your questions now and just hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Hall will be signing and personalizing books at the table that my coworker Tiff is pointing at, where you got your drinks when you came in. We'll move them. But if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of Setting a Place for Us online using the link in the live stream description. Setting a Place for Us is an intimate collection of essays and recipes exploring the history of 8 countries to understand the impact of geopolitical conflict and its outcomes on cuisine and food systems. Each chapter is devoted to a different country and opens with an essay on the culture and its history. An original and groundbreaking work, Setting a Place for Us returns agency to the people whose stories have been ignored. Hawa Hassan is a James Beard award-winning author, celebrated chef, Food Network personality, and founder of Best Foods, a line of African-inspired condiments that blend tradition and innovation. Born in Somalia and shaped by her experiences as a refugee, Hawa uses food as a bridge to connect people and cultures. She's the author of the critically acclaimed In Bibi's Kitchen and has been featured in Forbes, The New Yorker, and Eater. Hawa continues to inspire through her storytelling, passion for culture, and dedication to celebrating the flavors of her home continent. As I mentioned earlier, Kimberly Drew joins Hawa in conversation tonight. Kimberly Drew is a curator and cultural critic. Drew received her BA from Smith College in Art History and African American Studies, and her book Black Futures and This Is What I Know About Art are both available wherever books are sold. So without further ado, please help me welcome Hawa and Kimberly.
So funny.
Yay! Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome home.
Thank you. So Hawa is one of the brilliant minds of food of our generation. Such a humble woman, so we'll just get that out of the way. There's no room for humility tonight. We're just gonna put that on the back burner for now. I really want this to be an opportunity for you to sing this story. I think that when we create books that aren't 100% our words and aren't 100% our stories, what we're doing is making a promise, a promise and an intention towards holding the responsibility of the stories of others. And those stories couldn't be made more precarious by the ways in which these countries have found themselves in the spaces that they have, all with their own unique story, lineage, and food traditions. Because Hawa is also incredible, you wrote this like very thoughtful handwritten note. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, to the people?
Yes, to the people. And one of the questions that you raised in that note was, what does it mean to begin again? And I felt like that was the perfect place to begin this conversation. What were some of the findings as you were constructing this book about even the concept of beginning? Because it is this kind of ever-evolving thing, especially in relationship to food, especially literally making things from scratch.
Yeah, so I started with my own story because I didn't really know what it meant to begin for other people, but I did know for myself that when I was thinking about, because of the way that I grew up, and I'd grown up in many different worlds, I continue to always think about where is home, who is home, what does food look like to me currently, what relationships are important to me now. And when I was thinking about my own story, and this book, as I say in the intro, is like, it started in 2014 and it only just came to be because there were so many things about my own beginning and endings I needed to confront. And I'm getting really emotional. I don't know why, but when I was writing this in the beginning, it was so difficult because I hadn't even worked through my own story. And so when I met with people in 2022, I was in a really good place. I had answered some questions for myself and felt complete in my own self. And so when I went to other people, I think what I was praying for was, how do I hold their stories while not overshadowing and occupying what they're sharing with me? And so when I asked a lot of people, what does it mean to begin? Some people gave me simple answers, like it just means having a cup of coffee with my uncle who's visiting Queens this week. For some people, it was much more complex. It was refugee camps in Jordan. It was restarting in Lebanon, in Beirut. For some, it was restarting again in places like Kinshasa when they were coming from their village. And so for everybody, it was different. And I think that continues to evolve. Doesn't matter who you are or where you are. Hopefully, if you're growing, you're constantly restarting.
It makes sense to have, well, one, we're just like underneath it.
Yeah.
I think we can all kind of agree we're in a moment where our minds, our bodies are undernourished.
Yeah.
Where we are overstimulated, where there isn't nearly enough nourishment for the amount of data that we're taking in and the ways in which we're spread very thinly. And in thinking about this physical book with an ISBN number that exists in libraries and bookstores alike, on kitchen counters, on coffee tables, I was thinking about what it means to tell these stories also in the digital age.
Yeah.
One of the interviews you did recently, you had this like incredible quote that was saying that food is loud.
Yeah.
And I think so much about any of us who have the hobbies that we occupy, our work that we do, and how so much of it has become something that's quantified.
Yep.
And also coexist in the death place that is social media. And so I wonder, in your own words, if you could speak to us a bit more about what this book is and what it is not.
Yeah.
Because I think the internet and algorithms really flatten something that is as nuanced as a book like this.
Yeah, it's so funny that you ask, because on this tour I've been talking about when people say, why this book, I constantly bring up, because I grew up when these stories were being flattened in the media. I grew up protesting getting my U.S. citizenship because George Bush was in office, which I paid for that choice many, many years later. It took me like another 18 years to get. I just became a U.S. citizen in 2022, if that tells you anything. And this was like 2003 when I refused becoming a U.S. citizen. And so the intention really was to tell a better story. But I think in this time, I think all of us need to ask ourselves, like, how do we occupy stories that don't belong to us? And that's what this book, I hope, brings forth. It's how do you sit and listen to other people's stories without seeing yourself in it? The other day, this is a random story and off subject, but the other day, a friend in Atlanta who I went to middle school with sent me a video of this young man saying, what happened to stories or what happened to recipes when grandmothers die? And I was like, who's this white guy? So I wrote her immediately, and it had like 100 likes. I was like, I'm not going to watch this because social media is going to pump this out. It's going to catch like wildfire, and he'll become the authority on this story that he's repeating. Today, a friend sent it to me who works at Global Citizen, and she was like, I love this. And I just took a screenshot of what I sent to my friend about a week ago and sent it to my other friend. And I said, a week ago, it only, it had 100 likes, and now it has over 2.7 million views. And what I was saying to my other friend was like, the whole ecosystem supports flattening these stories, right? The whole ecosystem says, we will tell these stories, but we'll only do it from our perspective. We will cook these foods and we will occupy them, and we will not call a recipe by its name because then we have to give context. And so I hope this book becomes context. I hope it becomes research for some people, and I hope for some people it becomes a window in which they can go and seek more knowledge.
I love that. And I think,
oh yeah, come sit, LaTanya.
There's always a seat for you, LaTanya.
Yeah. Oh, your braids look so good.
Hi.
Hi.
It drives me to the other thing I was thinking about. So I am not a chef. My girlfriend is here. She's the chef in our relationship and the chef in our shared space. I am a person who eats a lot and have actually texted you to be like, so I know you're working on a few projects, and if you need someone to come over and sit at your table, I'm available.
And that's true.
But it makes me think about how multisensory a book like yours is as well. Like, one of my favorite things also was the decision to include, to your point, the pronunciation of dishes, because I think that often gets lost too, even in the ways that people come to introduce themselves. Oh, my name is this, but you can call me this.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean for recipes to be handed down? There's so much room for continued erasure and loss when we
Yeah.
don't call the things that we call them.
Right.
And
And we give other people permission unbeknownst to ourselves when we say, like, my name is Amanatu, but just call me M or whatever, That's I don't know anybody named Amanatu, but
I
you
do.
know what I mean? Okay.
People call her Amina.
Oh,
Yeah.
see?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. It's like, you're not going to call me H. And actually, you said something the other day on social media where you were like, my name is Kimberly. Like, it's not Kim, it's not anything else, it's just Kimberly.
I wonder if you could talk about some of the multisensory things that came together, because this is a book as much about telling as it is listening. What were some of the sounds that you heard in the process of making this book that were satiating to you?
One thing I talk about is when I left Congo, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, I just felt like I'd been in a shell game. Talk about cars, talk about people on foot, talk about dust, talk about the speed in which the American dollar moves. So I was so incredibly overwhelmed and exhausted. And I had just left the James Beard Awards. And so I just was going I should have taken a break in between, but I didn't want to put myself in something that didn't belong to me and then create a story about why I didn't win or why I won. So I just went on to the next thing. And so when I left Congo, Liberia was like a soft embrace because the Liberians are just kind and they're on the water and they eat fish. So it was a whole different experience. But when I left Liberia and came home, I was really exhausted. And that was 4th of July. And a few months later, I went to Beirut. And when I landed that night, unbeknownst to me, I'd gotten Mia Riley, my photographer, a hotel right next to the mosque. And if you're a Muslim kid, that call of prayer is going to come up at 6 a.m. and no matter what, you're going to be up. And so the call of prayer came up in the morning and I was like, oh, I'm home. Immediately I felt centered. And I talk about that in the intro to Lebanon. And so that was one for me. It was like the call of prayer to many of these countries I went to was really centering and felt like home and felt like a return of sorts to myself, because my first apartment in Brooklyn was in Bed-Stuy and Hawley and Nostrand, and the mosque is right there. And one of the reasons why I left was because the mosque was right there. I was like, I can't do this.
I was by that mosque too, and my Wi-Fi was literally called Call to Prayer.
Oh my God. We were probably there around the same time. Yes. I was like, I got to get out of here. And then Fort Greene. And so that for me was like a return of sorts. Another thing was it's sensory in that like people around the world eat with their hands. And so there was a lot of being fed by strangers, like physically being fed. And I grew up with that with my Ethiopian friends, it being gorsha, like people shoving food down your throat. And so that to me was really beautiful. And then another one was just like the sound of Arabic. I grew up reading the Quran and hearing Arabic all the time. And it's such an endearing language and so similar to my own Somali. So it felt really nice to be on the road and hear that often.
One of the other things that is such a key theme in the book is prayer, and the ways in which you found continuity across the different cultures that you were interacting with, interviewing, recording. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the role of prayer in the book.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the way that people even make food around the world is meditative. It's ritualistic. There's nothing fast about it, And I hope that that is told in the recipes, because for me, it was about, someone asked me 2 nights ago at Politics and Prose, what was it that I was hoping to capture? Because to sell a book means you have to make these recipes for the home cook as well, right? And so I was saying to Joe that though these recipes are engineered for the home cook, because I don't want to scare them away, the truth of it is that I needed to honor the people that made them. And so there's still a meditative process. There's a dumpling recipe in the Afghanistan chapter, and it's laborsome. And that shows up throughout the book in that there's nothing fast about it. There's, people will be in the midst of feeding you and they're like, I got to go pray. And everybody will just go wash up and everyone goes to pray, which I thought was really beautiful. And another thing I talk about is like seeing the Christians and the Muslims live alongside one another. Like this narrative that there's I'm sure there is conflict, but that there is constant conflict in everyday life between the two religions doesn't really exist in many of these places.
Mm.
So again, we go back to that flattening
Mhm.
of stories and building narratives that, these people are not living within.
It's so interesting as you're speaking about that. So I work in the visual arts, and it's a very fast creative discipline. It's like people look at paintings for 8 seconds or less. People
Ooh.
might spend a lifetime working on something, and the ratio of that's really what's the word? Reductive. But food is slow. Food and making is slow, and
If it's good, it's slow.
if it's good, it's slow. But also, one thing that gets, I think, lost in food dialogues is the ways in which ingredients are sourced. And especially in relationship to land, we will often see images of conflict, and we will see images of place, but we don't understand what's going on there agriculturally. And I wonder if you could talk about that relationship to the land, and not just the end result that comes on the plate, or the further result, which is the version of these recipes that are made for home cooks.
Yeah, I think the best way that I would sum up that question is that people in these places live their lives in seasons. So even the way that they eat, and I was really shocked in Lebanon, a lot of the people would pickle so much of their vegetables because winters were becoming more harsh than they had been previously. And so they would have, one of the things that they kept saying is like, every good Lebanese kitchen has a pantry, like a cold pantry and a warm pantry. And some of the people that I spoke to after, like Afghanis that moved to Queens, they, and I said, what did you take from home? They said, oh, I took seeds. And so their relationship with even just the way that they see things, and I know this from my own life, my mother is the same way. When you talk to her about what was the thing that you took when we, it's a side story, but when we were leaving Somalia the night that we left, my mom was 9 months pregnant. And then right when we got to Kenya, her number one thing was like, I'm cutting all my hair off. And she cut her hair off. I'm like, why'd you do that? Like years later, I asked, and she's like, we were starting over again. And so there's a different way that I think like people interact with the land. There's a different emotional, an emotional way of being that people outwardly show up, and then some people go inward, right? And so when you talk about like my father, he's never left Somalia. He's a camel herder. And so when I think about him, and even when I think about his relationship to his land, it's so much more different because it's nomadic. So he's moving him and a bunch of people who work for him are constantly moving camels around Somalia. And as drought and climate also, I talk about this in the book. It's like so many people are worried about displaced people or refugees. There's 75 million people that are displaced around the world, and there's 65 million within their own countries. So you're talking about 13 point something that when we're hearing in the media don't ever even make it to America. And so again, that talk about staying on your land and restarting. So a lot of people often restart within their borders.
And then also too, not even to speak about so much of migration that's forced through climate crisis, which of course is connected to the ways
and
that
it's
we
coming
eat.
Here.
It's here.
It's here, yeah.
It's here. In another interview, you say, cooking is my vehicle for advocacy, a way to amplify our histories, cuisines, and voices. And I wonder, because there is a way to write a book like this. There's a way to prepare a book like this that could be more tragic or could be over celebratory. And I think you find in your advocacy this really humbling middle place. And I wonder if you could talk about not necessarily the fight, because I don't know if it was a fight for you, but the labor to getting towards something that could hold all those nuances and complexities.
Yeah, I mean, I think about my own story. Like, I've never seen myself as a victim, and I've been on my own since I was 7. And so when I think about people that I'm writing about or foods that I'm producing, the only lens I'm often using is joy. And lately, joy has become so trendy, which is so fascinating to me because I'm like, I don't see anybody outside dilly-dallying but me. And these two know. And so, I think when you're using a healthy lens to examine things, like when you're whole and you're examining something, you see it from a different perspective. And I think oftentimes a lot of writers insert themselves in stories. And so when we haven't done the work and we start to think about these stories, we start to tell them from our own, from like our own minuses, from our own like place of, I don't have enough of that, so I'm going to talk about that thing. And when I was writing an email today about the history, how this book came to be, 10 Speed asked me, did I want to write another book? And I was like, I'm working on one. I was like, I'm working on a proposal to take to auction. And they were like, we'll buy it. And it never went to auction. But I haven't had to fight because sadly, these stories are not being told. And the people that have the power don't even know where to begin. So there needs to be many more of us who are constantly hitting them over the head with these stories from a positive place, but from the nuance, right? By saying like, here's the history, but here's also the joy and here's the current day.
This is a bit of like a naughty question, but I think when we think about like global perspectives on food, and especially thinking about the responsibility that we take up to, let's say, enliven the margins instead of fill them in, there's a question of taste. And like actual taste palette and sensibilities. And so many of these cultures have been cast out because of an unfamiliarity or overcomplication or certain palettes that it's not agreeable with. Which I think, I don't know if there's like for some other books, there's like emotional testers. And I wonder like what the rubric is in a cookbook lens for like what is good and what is not. And also how you yourself, with your own taste sensibilities, were able to build this compendium of recipes. Like, do you even like all of it? You know what I mean? Like,
I love all the recipes.
But like, how do those questions, especially as like, I've never made a cookbook, probably will never. How do you?
You never know. You're moving to London.
Scream.
You might need to
scream. People are watching. How do you make decisions like that? Because it exists in this continuum alongside other books. Alongside aunties and cousins and children who will read these things and say, this is not how this is made, this is how this is made, or this dish is better, that dish is better. How do you move with a soft authority around taste?
So I don't work in a vacuum. I work with a bunch of collaborators, and there's a woman who I've been working with and who I've been friends with for 20 years and been working with for 10 years named Amy Stevenson, who's been in food for about 30 years. And so she did, and I kid you not, hundreds of hours of research on this book in terms of recipes while I was on the road getting the stories. And our baseline for each recipe was, does this reflect an Egyptian kitchen? Is this a Lebanese kitchen? And then we took all that research and we took it to Lebanese people and said, does this reflect your country? Is this something you would say is in every Lebanese kitchen? And I think a lot of people don't understand, sometimes you see a book and it's like 150 recipes, blah, 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 but that's because there aren't stories in the book, right? And so there's only 75 recipes in this book, which means there's about 8 recipes in each chapter. It's not many, right? So you're just trying to get what an anchor of a kitchen would look like in these places. So that's the number one thing. And then the second thing is like, the people that I'm working alongside at these publishing houses are not authorities on these stories, and they're not authorities on these recipes. And so sometimes they're learning through my research. They're learning through Amy's research, which I'm very glad for, because there's not a lot of pushback, but the onus is on me to be correct. And so then I have to depend on my community and say, hey, Omar, this is what we're thinking. How does this sound? And oftentimes people are like, no, that should be called sobrat ade. Like, that's a lentil soup. And I'm like, but isn't this writing a lentil soup? They're like, no, you forgot the ade. And so there's a lot of correction that happens. And I'm very grateful to have that back and forth working relationship with people. And I trust my community to correct me, where I think there are a lot of people that put out work in this industry. And again, because we're not calling a thing and we're occupying it, we're just completely erasing the people that it comes from. And so there's a disservice being done to the reader, and then there's a disservice coming from the writer and the publisher.
And that's an interesting thing about bookmaking and cooking in general, is like there is always this trial and error. And the thing is never really done. Which is so wild, because you'd be like,
the cooking or the book? The book is okay.
But the book isn't done.
Yeah, the book is never done.
The book is never done. The book lives on. Like, the book is in all of our hands now, but of course it continues to be a living and breathing thing that moves through the world, which is my next thing I want to talk to you about, is travel in relationship to the book. And specifically the ways in which it wasn't just you saying, okay, I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to like go to this mom and pop shop that's on this, eater 56
Yeah.
hours in such and such a place. There were so many characters who really helped to orchestrate your journey. And I wonder if you could talk about the power of word of mouth in the book.
Yeah, I mean, again, like same for In BB's Kitchen. And, just to like connect, to do a through line, like In BB's Kitchen was a love letter to grandmothers. This is an expansion of that. It's a love letter to people who've experienced displacement and civil unrest. And so there is not a single country I went to that I was not put in touch with someone who is from there or someone who is living there. And each chapter was designed by a person from there. And so I wish there was a way that I had, I lacked some common sense and decided to follow Eater or someone else, because maybe the work would have been easier, but it wouldn't have been as rewarding. I wouldn't have met, Faisal in Beirut, who's the man who, he's on my Instagram, he like feeds everybody on the sidewalk. I wouldn't have met Tanya in Liberia. So there's so much overlapping between my own life and the way I live here in Brooklyn and the people that I met. And many of these people have had their own lives abroad and have gone back home. And so a lot of it was just, it's from my community. It's from my global community. I can't express that enough. And the same was true with In BB's Kitchen. Like, I didn't do that book in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. How did you manage translation in relationship to all these different locales? Because it's a different kind of listening.
Yeah, I thank God for Riley. He's not here this evening, but he recorded everything for me after he was done shooting. And then I recorded on my phone the voice. And so I would have a translator like standing next to the person, and then they would repeat the thing. And then when I came back home, I transcribed everything. And then I rewrote every story and sent it to every subject and said, does this reflect your story? And then they sent back yes or no, or they wanted to take something out. And we did that same formula across the pages.
That's slow work.
Oh,
it's really, I'm like, everybody needs to work like that, because it's so easy to cut corners and to rush, and like that's not appetizing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not appetizing to my publisher either. I think it took me an extra year to get it done.
But it's work worth waiting for. No, like I think that's the beautiful thing, and not to continue to draw metaphors to food and eating, but it is very that. It's like you smell the smells. You're being electrified by the possibility of something. Of course, when the final thing drops, you want it to be the best version. There's nothing worse than going to your favorite restaurant and the thing doesn't taste the way that it's supposed to. Like, we have expectations.
I know, but doesn't it feel like we're living in a fast casual world? Like everything is like here one moment, gone the next.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about conversations around artificial intelligence, of course, as so many of us have, and how we consider mastery in relationship to those dialogues. Because I've been thinking a lot about mastery as this collective exercise. Like, mastery doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like, you can be great, but mastery exists in the context of other people who are striving towards this great thing. And we're in this moment where we have come to so value only the final product, the fastest food, the fastest book that's in a 5-book deal that you're constantly pumping out because it sees the quickest return. And we're losing sight of the making. Which is like the reward in the first place.
Did you two just have this conversation?
Oh, but it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and there's so much artfulness that's lost in the making, and we're running out of time, which is criminal. But I wonder if you could talk about an important mistake you made
on this book.
Yeah.
That I didn't take it to auction.
Fair.
I could have used that money.
That's tea. No, that's tea. Everybody take it to auction. Don't take the first offer.
Take it to auction, people. Yeah. Seriously, I mean, I wish I could say, because it's backbreaking work.
Yeah.
You should be able to get back what you put in.
Were there other healthy learnings or loving corrections that you received?
Yeah, hire a producer. I had my poor husband over there, at home producing everything, and he'd be like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "I'm stuck in Guinea Conakry." He's like, "How did you end up there?" I'm like, "The flight landed. Can you call Ethiopian Airways?" So things like that, or we got to the airport and we needed a visa to Kinshasa. Everybody said we didn't need a visa. The embassy, everyone. JFK was like, go on. We get to Paris. They're like, you actually need a visa, so someone should call us. And I was like, who's going to call you from, Congo? Anyway, I ended up getting one from some guy on Instagram, but he hustled me. He charged me $1,000. And so things like that, like I was constantly being hustled. I probably spent my whole book of ants on making the book. So those were some mistakes that I know can be avoided, but I think you need a team in order to do that, and you need support.
I love that. It makes it all the more important to think about, the collective in relationship to bookmaking and
how you want to work and how you want to preserve yourself in the future.
Yeah. Oh. Well, that's it. That's it for us. Now is your turn if you guys have questions.
I love it.
Yeah.
I like what you said around the people that you've worked with before, basically, and how it would be awesome for them to be able to kind of create their own stories as well and share them. And so, have you thought about that at all in terms of how, to work with people with certain types of media in order to share their own stories directly, and just how you thought about that in your work as well?
I don't know that I've thought about the people and the pages in that way, but I have thought about how I want to participate in publishing. And I think the best way and the healthiest way to do it and to give other people opportunities to create your own thing. And so that's where currently my focus is on. Hi.
My name is Dada.
Hi, Dada.
Thank you so much for this work.
Thank you.
I wanted to know, how did the process of putting this book together impact or change your rituals at home when you cook?
Oh, I was just telling somebody this. I think before this book, I cooked with a lot of warmer spices because I'm East African. So almost like a garam masala flavor. So cardamom, cumin, turmeric, cinnamon. Cilantro, which this one has said to me over and over, easy on the cilantro. But now we make a lot of cooler flavors. So a lot of yogurt, a lot of tahini, a lot of pistachios, a lot of shredded coconuts. And so much more cooler flavors.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, Josh.
I know you're always on the go. How often do you get a chance to actually try some of the food in the book, or just do your own cooking, meal prep?
Oh, often. I mean, I eat at home a lot. I have a series on Instagram called There's Food at Home because it's expensive to be outside, and food in America is really not that great currently. So we try to eat at home as much as possible. Yeah.
So are you planning to do cookbook only about Somalia,
No, Somalis have 9 recipes. I think there are a lot of great Somali stories and, folklores and tales and things like that. And I think there are a lot of great women's stories. And I've been thinking about art in Somalia and how how maybe you can elongate what that might look like. But in terms of food, I think it's already done in Bibi's kitchen. There's great 8 recipes in there. Hi. Are you from Somalia?
Yes, I'm from Somalia.
Will you say that I'm right about the...
Yes, she's very right. My name is Shukri. I'm coming all the way from Oakland, California.
Wow,
welcome.
welcome.
I'm happy to be here to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Love your biscuits.
Thank you.
My question is, with all your travel and all the recipes that you have shared with us, would you ever consider creating a series where you travel and make recipes and eat with locals, cook with locals, how on
Yeah.
steroids, would you ever consider that?
Yeah, actually, my dear friend and collaborator, Howie Khan, is back there because this is something we're constantly talking about. Again, it's just a matter of finding the right people to partner with, finding the right people who have power that want to support this kind of thing. I think people oftentimes say they want to support it, but the truth is that they have a hard time doing it off the pages.
Which is why I tell everybody to buy this incredible book,
Yeah.
support and share the media, especially like I think that pivot into the TV space and kind of more filmic space is a really annoying jump to make, but you do develop so much media. So if you guys see things that pop across your feed, that's one way to really make it happen.
Yep.
So that random dudes don't get 1.7 million views for asking simple questions.
Insanity.
Insanity. I think that's a healthy place to end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thanks to everyone who asked questions. Thank you, Kimberly, for moderating, and thank you, Hawa, for celebrating the launch with us. I have a few final reminders. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can purchase a copy of the book by clicking the link in the description. For those of us in person, we have additional copies of the book available right where you checked in. Hawa will be signing and personalizing books at that alcove over there. And we ask that you do gather all your personal belongings. We're going to fold up the chairs very quickly once you get up.
People want to go home.
The Knicks are playing in 10 minutes.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Okay, Kwame, leave. You can
Knicks
go.
at 6, baby.
Oh my God.
We also have copies of Kimberly's book at the front.
Yes.
So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. I'll be over there signing. And then here's this.
Thank you so much.
It's all in here.